So we are going to have a serious conversation, but it's predicated on the premise of our Vision 30 as a country, which I know all of us have read. We've all read NDS 1, NDS 2 back to back. So we're just preaching to the choir here. So it is really for the benefit of the people on Facebook watching online. And I'm sure you're going to ask hard-hitting questions also for their benefit. This is a room of intellectuals, right? Did I misread this room? Right. But even then, my encouragement to the panelists today is, with our high literacy rate in Zimbabwe, sometimes we forget to dumb things down. We like to speak in big, fancy words, and we all pretend we understand exactly what it is. I'll be the first one to confess I had to read the difference between fiscal and monetary policy, because they say it like they're one thing, and I learned a lot. So we're going to ask that we speak in very simple terms, doctor. We don't have PhDs, just keep it very simple for some of us, so that we follow. The pillars underpinning our Vision 30 and our journey to being an upper middle class economy by 2030 include macroeconomic stability, reforms to our fiscal and monetary policy, inclusive growth that says leave no man behind, re-engagement with the global financial community, and fostering a friendly and competitive business environment that attracts both domestic and foreign investment. So this afternoon, we are going to unpack some of those pillars, particularly around our fiscal and monetary policy, the de-dollarization, which scares quite a number of people. And I don't even know, should we be scared? Today, the experts are going to let us know. And we're also going to explore how digitalization can be a catalyst for economic development that is inclusive. So to kick us off, I'll start with the gentleman to my immediate left, Kipson. I'm only starting with you because I want an award from CEO Africa Roundtable. Else I'll pay it. So what is upper middle income status, and what are we as a country right now?
Thank you, Sharon, and good afternoon, everybody. Hope you can hear me loud and clear. Yeah. Okay, thank you. So, it's up the roundtable, those two funny awards. And people have got a tendency of confusing us on the serious network. All right, so we do serious business. Yes. All right. So Tapla. So thank you for asking a very pertinent question. So what the Bretton Woods institutions, particularly the World Bank, does is to come up with the classifications in classifying countries, whether they are rich or poor. All right. So obviously the least developed countries, the lower income countries, the lower middle income countries, the upper middle income countries, and the high income countries, which you call the rich, where everyone loves to flock to. So for Zim currently, we've already attained a middle income status, but a lower middle income status, which is something around 1.3 GNI per capita to around the 4,000, I think it should be 495 GNI per capita. Our aspiration is to go a step further into the middle income status, which is GNI per capita of around 4,496 to around 13,000 plus. That's where we aspire to. And so upper middle income countries generally are countries that invest heavily in high impact areas, in particular infrastructure. And they present a huge scope of business creation. So everything is flourishing there. And that's where they aspire to be as a country. Currently, our GNI per capita as for 2024, we're around 3,300. So we want to get to around 4,450 thereabouts. So mathematically, if you number crunch these things, given that we are left with 5 years, I think, it requires that we have to grow at very high rates for us to achieve that. But the qualitative side of being in upper middle income status, but some of the variables I think are within reach.
Thank you for that. So asking for a friend, sometimes I tend to the friend. GNI is?
Gross national income. So this is the total output produced by the nationalities of that particular country. In simple terms.
So if we were to say had an active investor base of residents but not nationals, the income that they generate doesn't get computed into our GNI.
So GNI, you are talking about the nationalities of that particular country, irrespective of where they are domiciled.
And the number, the 4,450 thereabouts, is that per month or per annum?
So this is an annualized statistic. So it's fair.
So we are on our way there. Thank you for that, and for taking me along on the journey. Tonight I'll be speaking in the GNI terminology and per capita terminology. Now I would like to invite Percy to the conversation. Again, just setting the baseline of the basics so that we all go along on a conversation. What is the difference, if any, between fiscal policy and monetary policy, and how do these two interact in stimulating growth in an economy?
Thank you. So as you were speaking about the Vision 2030, it's a long-term vision of the country, 12.25 years. And it's a reform strategy of the country. But to operationalize that reform strategy, you need policies. You need the management policies to be able to achieve that vision 2030, but also to achieve the different components of the vision 2030. The fiscal and monetary policies are the two most important short-term policy measures or management tools that are used to achieve the long-term goals of the country. Now, our first goal was stability, macroeconomic stability in the Vision 2030. But to achieve that, you needed a combination of the monetary and fiscal tools. You may want to agree with me that the volatilities that we were facing in the economy were on account of the fiscal imbalances, in that the country was expending or spending more than it was generating. So that is the fiscal side of the economy. The fiscal side speaks about the government expenditures and the revenues to support that expenditure. And in our case, the revenue is predominantly taxes, as discussed before. 95% of our revenues are generated from tax, and is part of the fiscal policy. But those taxes or revenue they have to be spent to meet the requirements of the country. That is the budget, the essence of the budget. So that aspect of meeting the expenditures of the government from the revenue generation speaks about the fiscal policy of the economy. And in our case, the fiscal policy was not in a good space, and it was the major driver of volatilities, in that our deficits, which were arising from the balance between the revenues and the expenditures, were on average prior to the reforms, because we only started reforms in 2018, October 2018, above 10%. But these fiscal imbalances tended to have an effect on the monetary sustainability of the country. So the monetary policy then speaks of the stability. It's more to do with stability, price and exchange rate stability in the economy. That is the essence of the monetary policy. But to achieve that stability, you use the monetary policy tools. And the monetary policy tools, common monetary policy tools, and those that we have been using in this country are the interest rate policy or the money supply or the open market operations. But also we had some interventions relating to the reserve facilities. And those were the tools that we were using to control the monetary or to achieve stability in the economy. You may want now to agree with me that the two should work hand in hand. Because they work hand in hand, the fiscal policy by its nature, because it is coming from the ministry, and the Minister of Finance is the one who is in charge of the fiscal policy as the treasurer of the country. But you want to agree with me that there is political influence, because as soon as you talk about the minister, there's some political influences. And hence the volatilities I'm talking about, they relate to some political influence. It can be traced to some political influences. And because of those political influences, you always want the monetary or the conventional situation is for the monetary policy to be independent. And for that monetary policy to be independent, that is the Reserve Bank should be able to make independent decisions from the politicians. That's why there's need for a monetary policy committee, which is an independent committee, which makes independent decisions. Because in the absence of that monetary policy independence, you will find out that the influences from the fiscal policy will have a significant bearing on what happens to stability in the economy. And in our situation, this can also be traced to the influence that we had from the fiscal policy. So in summary, I can say the fiscal policy is mainly to do with the government, the central government, and obviously the other aspects of government, but to do with how government spends its money and how government generates its money. In the monetary policy and the fiscal policy's main objective is to meet objectives relating given stability, but also to influence other variables in the economy, such as the growth. You want to achieve growth. That's why you see the minister setting up a growth target. We're targeting the economy to grow by 6.6% this year, but also targeting the employment targets in the economy. You want employment levels to be at, unemployment levels to be at around 25% by a certain period. But the monetary policy is mainly to do with stability and should be, in ideal situation, independent.
I feel very educated. So fiscal policy, that's government and the minister. Monetary policy is Reserve Bank and Monetary Policy Committee, which should be independent. But doesn't the minister appoint RBZ governors and Monetary Policy Committee members? How do those get appointed? As we talk about what reforms can enhance that independence that you say is ideal.
So in our case, the Reserve Bank governor, deputy governor, and the Monetary Policy Committee are appointed by the president. But obviously, with the advice or the Minister of Finance, because it's the one on the ground. But their appointment is from the president.
Is there scope for any reform there to enhance independence, or that works?
Yes, I think it's in line with the international best practice. Like the Monetary Policy Committee has to be independent. And so far, I think there is a significant measure of independence in the operation of the monetary policy in the country.
Thank you for that. George, you had podium time before, so I'm just going to let you rest a little bit, and I will stress this gentleman, and I will be with you shortly.
This is because of this.
That's partly is a problem. We all dressed up for this event. George rocks up in jeans and a t-shirt. If you watch the mic. Is there anything you would like to contribute so far, George?
No, but I think my brother assistant overestimates us as CAs. He doesn't understand to qualify. We just need it to get and subtract it to memorize all stuff. Move it. But I think he summarized it quite nicely at the end. Fiscal is the government and its money, how the government earns its money, and how it spends it. Monetary is all the money in the economy. How much money we're creating in the economy, and how much we price that money at in terms of interest rates and exchange rates. The Minister of Finance is like the finance director of the government. So he writes checks. He determines the revenue and he writes checks. The governor is like the banker of the government. He honors checks. Sometimes the minister has no money, so he issues TPs. And when he issues a TP, he's saying to you, go to my bank on this day, and my bank will give you money. But if the monetary policy is independent, the bank, even if you come with this IOU from the bank's client and say, Minister said I must come on this day, will give me money. The bank says, my friend, your investor has no money in the bank. And this is why sometimes you then hear of TBs being rolled over or not being honored, because the monetary policy is being independent. They're saying, your guy doesn't have money, he's maxed out his overdraft. Sorry, that's an a-hole. And that's then when that's happening, you've got correct checks and balances in the system.
Thank you
For the literature and VH people.
Since my primary profession is a commercial lawyer before investment advisor, I feel attacked on the literature. Oh, okay, so we're same as a group. So back to you, Kipson. So with monetary and fiscal reforms being sort of a key cog in the macroeconomic reforms that are needed, tax reforms are a huge part of that, and we had the commissioner earlier on in the day. What would you pick out as the key fiscal reforms that are most critical to improve the business environment and attract domestic and foreign investment?
Thank you, Sharon. So, when Mixton Trudy became Minister of Finance, our budget mix, that is recurrent expenditure versus capex, was perhaps over 85% or if not 90% recurrent expenditure, and only about 10% was gone towards capex. That's why we're not seeing any roads being constructed in all those kind of things. But I think what has managed to was actually to reorient that mix to have more resources going towards capex. So that's one critical reform. You cannot generate money, eat it all. You need to invest some of it in order to guarantee future production. So that's one key reform. The second key reform, any overtaxed country kills what we call the aggregate demand. And when you aggregate demand is what we demand as a collective, right? When you kill aggregate demand, you do not incentivize production. So there's talked about the monetary policy, the fiscal policy as the short-term policies to manage and coordinate the economy. But in the long term, the economy grows based on productive policy. For instance, industrial development policy, because that's what generates goods and services in the market. So you need to be able to incentivize the people that generate those goods and services through appropriate tax incentives. But if you look at our tax architecture in this country, I strongly subscribe to the view that we are an over-taxed country. As a country, therefore killing aggregate demand, and that's not healthy for future growth of the nation. For instance, there are some texts which I do maybe I don't know what word to use, man. The lack of because of my limited vocabulary, I say bad taxes. For instance, you remember the famous IMTG tax. This is one of the most pervasive texts that I ever see in the history of mankind, because it's a tax based on transaction. That's number one. Number two, we also promised that this tax, because of financial inclusion and everything else, is there to capture the formal sector so that they also contribute to the national figures. So the intention very right? But if you look at where we are right now, we are becoming increasingly informal, and the informal sector is muted. They now operate purely based on cash transactions. And they are not TT. If I'm using cash, you don't catch me. You only catch me when I transact via the bank. So that it is outlived its purpose. So I would like to see certain taxes being removed. There's also one other issue, which I'm happy that the government has taken note of, the costs of regulation. If you look at regulatory authorities that are in this society, I've lost count. There are too many. At some point, I even challenged the minister to say, maybe you need to do count. You might be collecting less revenue than these regulators. They actually be collecting, but I'm happy that the government has already taken heed of that, and there are a number of regulatory reforms. If you have been following the post-cabinet briefings, I think you have been hearing that you've reduced this, you've reduced that, which I think is one significant reform, which I'm happy to see. The other fourth, I'm talking about tax, is to do with the simplicity when it comes to tax owner. At some count, I think there was a count say we've got about 55 tax heads that we need to comply with, well, depending on which sector you're operating for. For me, I'm happy to say, out of the profits or out of the revenues that you are going to make, pay 10% to government, and that's it. So I know if I make so much, I'm going to submit. So simplicity to around taxes. This actually makes the micro enterprises and some medium companies tax compliant, because it is a huge cost to comply. You need to employ the learned colleagues in this room, which actually demand huge pays to be able just to comply with the taxes. Lastly, which is probably a point I wanted to buttress on what Peso was saying, in the history of this country, we've always had three problems. Our problem either has been politics, or it has been the treasury, or it has been the RBC. All right? So you discover that during the time leading to the crisis we had in 2008, the problem was clear. It was sitting at RBC during the time of my dear brother Gigi. It was pointing to the what? The predecessor to Dr. Manguchi. I forgot her name. Why were they printing? Because they were running what you call as fiscal activities. Something which has got absolutely nothing to do with the central bank. It's a total reverse now. You've got a central bank that is focusing on its core mandate. In other words, what George was saying, there is now zero or very little fiscal accommodation at the RBC. So they'll say, Utuli, go and spend as much as you can. But if you create your budget deficit, you are not going to finance it because you are not going to print. Because half the time these deficits are financed by credit. That was our challenge day. Fast forward to today, who is the problem? The problem is now sitting at treasury. You have got a treasury that is spending money which it do not have. If you look at a number of, I ran CEOs in the round table, so I talked to CEOs every day. They are owed serious money from the central government. You've provided the goods, you've done the service, but you haven't paid. Another typical example is the TBs that George talked about. They say with a TB, it matures, they don't honor. Then they used to roll it over. But I hear with the grapevine, this is not verified, right? That they are not giving rolling over, they just keep quiet. Yeah? So what does that mean? So we now have got a treasury that is misbehaving. Another critical example, which is also informed that I need to see associated with tax. You know, in this country, if you're an exporter, you're required to pay what are called export surrender requirements, which is a 30%, I think. Previously, it was being paid to RPZ, but now it's honored by Treasury. The last time I checked, that was just after the mid-term budget review. Treasury was owing over 270 million to exporters. This is money that has been given to Treasury in exchange of the local currency, which is the ZIC. So you take my money, but you don't give me my ZIC equivalent. Of course, the PEP said went to labor to try to explain why the situation is like that, to make this arrangement in this time. But what does it do? We are simply unsaving liquidity from these companies, which they are supposed. So there are a number of tax-related reforms that I would obviously want to see. Lastly, allow me to say this, is the payee. All right? The payee is a tax from the employee. Right? So when you take a higher payee from me, what you're simply saying, you are diminishing my ability to demand goods and services. So you're making me poor. All right? So I would rather advocate for taxes like VAT because it's based on value added, not payee. And if you look at the income payee free threshold, I think it's around $80 if you convert it to dollars. So surely we cannot take pride in taxing the poor. So, of course, there are a number of big areas.
Advocate Kipson with them. Thank you for those recommendations, Kipson. I chuckled at the simplify it, make it just 10%. That would be easy for us. It's typing. We type very easy. We can do that. But I just want to invite Casey to this conversation. Earlier on, you mentioned that 95% of the revenue sources for government is taxes. And part of what Kipson is recommending is that we streamline those taxes to create a more enabling and business-friendly environment. But what can we do if the money isn't enough? How do we broaden the tax base or diversify government revenue sources? How do we strengthen that part of our fiscal policy as government?
Thank you. Thank you. I think it's important to realize that our economic challenges are historical. Our economic challenges are legacy issues we're dealing with. And today, it's fair to comment that as a country and as policymakers, we carry a burden, a serious burden of the past. Now, it is very difficult to imagine these challenges being resolved in a short space of time, in 1 year, 2 years or so. But I think it is the reasoning that occurred to the policymakers when they embarked on the reforms, which are extending to 12.25 years. And that's the nature of reforms. But it's also a cognition of the fact that the challenges have to be uprooted. And uprooting these challenges cannot happen over a short space of time. So along with other reforms, there are tax reforms, but which tax reforms I think especially even rebalancing the budget itself. Because the 95% you are talking about of revenue being constituted from the taxes speaks to the performance of our budget. So you either need to rationalize your expenditures in line with the revenue inflows, so the 95% is managed down, or you have to increase the tax base, or you have to increase the tax net, which are the reforms. But those reforms alone are not enough to deal with a challenge of historical nature as our challenge. So, yes, we may apportion the blame to Treasury, but I think what the central bank, with the concurrence of Reserve Bank, I think between the policymakers, what they've done is, which is commended, is to move the quasi-fiscal activities, which are activities relating to the real economy, which, like he has indicated, there's nothing to do with the monetary authorities, to government. So there are billions that the Reserve Bank get contracted. You remember, and they also have been contracted for certain reasons. You remember our facilities from Afrexim Bank, all of them were transferred to Treasury. They are now sitting with Treasury, even including the facilities that were secured by future receivables from the surrender. They were transferred to Treasury. So Treasury is also carrying a burden from Treasury, if you are to be frank and honest. It's also trying to deal with a burden that may not have originated from Treasury, but may have also originated from the monetary authorities, but for a reason. And yes, we acknowledge the challenges that are happening in respect of the performance of the revenue, but also accumulation of arrears. But we must also agree on one thing, that despite these arrears, we have also witnessed the positive side of the aggression that created these arrears from government. For example, on the infrastructure development, would you want to agree with me that prior to the infrastructure development aggression by government, prior to 2018, you could not even point a single meaningful contracting company in this country. But now we see contracting companies all over that are employing multitudes of laborers, but that are also supporting livelihoods. And you may want to agree with me that if government is to tone down on the aggression significantly, it may not sit well with some of these contractors, despite the challenges that they are having with the government. So I see this as a trade-off that we must accept, given the historic nature of our challenges. But the issue is maybe just to find each other and come up with an optimal level of development in the economy against the challenges that comes with. So we should agree, because if we are to apportion all the blame to Treasury, it may not be the right way of doing it.
Indeed. I like to think that certainly the spirit of the discussion is not a blame apportionment, but analysis and how we can take the conversation forward. Before I invite George in, I just have a follow-up for you. On this aggressive stance and reallocation of more money to capex and all of that, are we not creating another problem that will be a legacy problem for future officials in the level of borrowing that we are doing to fund these infrastructure projects? How sustainable is that?
Clearly and admitted, the funding of infrastructure is not the best. And but I also can't think, given our current circumstances, of any other alternative, realistic alternative. Yes, we can talk of those of alternatives, but doesn't mean that the authorities are not trying. It may also speak to the challenges to attracting the suitable funding for infrastructure. By its nature, infrastructure, being a long-term project, requires long-term funding. But in our situation, our infrastructure is being funded by short-term funding made from the budget. And the reason being that the long-term funding is not available. Unlike other countries, including our regional peers, we have access to the support, external support. We are not intermediated in the global economy to access the suitable facilities in the global economy. But yes, I understand government is always trying to attract the suitable facility to fund infrastructure. But once that has not happened, I think a decision should be taken to say, should we stop or we move and manage with what we have, which I think the government has done, managing with what they have.
I'm going to come to you, Kipson, but before I do, George, given your background in the investment space and international banking, how do we reposition ourselves for re-engagement with the global financial community so that we can access appropriate funding for our infrastructure projects?
I think that question has been answered over and over in the last 20 years. It's now very clear that re-engagement is premised on two things. One is servicing our debt, but the other is spiritual living. And those are two sides of the same coin. While we're servicing our debt, because it's a fact we're in default multilateral lenders, we must also be pursuing a political/diplomatic solution. I think one without the other won't serve us, and that may be what it's informed. The complexity of that discussion may be what has informed the government's decision to make do what we have. We know that in the past few months or a year or so, we've had the FDB, Chisalo, Adesina try to come in and mediate between us and our predators. And we've seen there's a very, very tough discussion to be had. So I can sympathize with the choices that the government's made. Because you're trying to walk this tightrope. Because as I'm a banker, and in my other life I'm an entrepreneur, and I've been on both sides back. So as a banker, when somebody owes you, you say to them, move by that chance so I can give you more. As an entrepreneur, you're sitting there saying, but what if it doesn't? What if I dribble the little I have? It doesn't give me more. And sometimes you then choose to say, let me not believe the bank. Let me carry on walking as far as I can go with what I have in my pocket. I don't envy the policymakers. It's not an easy position to be in. And to be honest, I don't think any of us put in that same position solve that conundrum very easily.
Thank you for that, George. Kipson, two things for you. Your 2 cents on this aspect of the conversation, and then lead us with your thoughts on the, I want to say it causes a lot of anxiety. This talk about de-dollarization, which is supposed to happen in 2030, when we're supposed to have attained upper middle income status. So first, your thoughts to close this one, and then your views on de-dollarization, what it means for us, and how to get it right.
So I'll be a bit unpopular. I'm with George. There is no question about the issues to do with the tax. If we are to access a meaningful long-term finance, but I think the NSA the role is the political engagement, and that we have to take it seriously. But unfortunately, I think it is conditions where our political leaders are not willing to budge in. So we might be in this situation for a long period of time. I enjoy driving the long roads that are being constructed, but certainly we are creating a disaster of the future. Those roads are constructed based on debt, and that debt is predominantly domestic debt. You are using local players whom we are not paying full. You are just accumulating debt, and debt is what it is. I'm happy that I'm closing, so I won't have a time to spare it. Now let's come to the issue of to do the de-dollarization. Yes, a couple of weeks ago we had Fiscal for our annual CEOs roundtable, and this was a big debate on de-dollarization. Before I say my views, 85% of the CEOs that were in Fiscal were about 270 people. They were so skeptical about this thing because it's opaque. No one really knows what's going to happen, when, how, by who. So first thing is, I agree in theory and principle to us having our own currency as a monocurrency. The person is going in out. So there are no curbs on whether we need our own currency or not. I think that is clear. Every Zimbabwean would love to have their own currency because it comes with a lot of benefits. It gives us policy difference. These guys, they are working at the Arabs, it will be much, much easier if they actually our own monocurrency, which they can control left, right, and center. So the issue is, you can only solve a problem if you understand its causes. And Zimbabweans, you guys included, are not oblivious of how we got to where we want. And there was an attempt in 2019, if you still remember, the Zimbabwean dollar was demonetized. Demonetized, it means it was said this is no longer legal tender, it's no longer currency in this particular country. I think that was 2015, if I'm not mistaken, right? Then we started trading in US dollars and we joined our lives. Then there was a point where access to the dollars was a challenge. And the RBZ, his own wisdom, he said, the money that you're calling US dollars is not US dollars. I'm not going to put in exchange rate. And he pegged that exchange rate at 1 is to 2.5. I think that was in 2019, if I'm not mistaken, thereabout, right? So technically, he reintroduced the local currency during that particular year, right? And we know what happened to your balance sheets and everything else. Let's go talk about that. Was otherwise Sibira Magun's a lie. Then come 2024, they come up with this brilliant idea of the Zik, right? Zik. We all have to say the word Zik. Personally, I thought that was a master stroke. I thought that was a genius from the monetary authorities, but I was very vindicated. You remember the famous devaluation when we were promised that the value of this one is linked to the value of gold, right? They changed the language. It's no longer linked to the but it's base, right? So we have got a history of treachery and deceit. And that has killed all the confidence that we have discussed on this subject matter. In my conventional wisdom, currency is confidence. Without it, we can agree today that we are going to use the stones as our local currency. If God believes that these stones work, then they will work. But if we don't believe that, they won't work, they won't work. So, coming to the issue, I strongly believe, despite the numerical metrics that you get from my dear brother, Dr. Mshahan, say we've built the reserves, this one, we are ready, this card. Those are numerical metrics. The real metric is what I think as an economic agent. If I'm not prepared to accept what you're giving me because I don't trust you, it doesn't work. So the biggest thing they need to solve is the trust issue. How do we do this? That's a complex issue. And that brings me to the timeline 2030. I strongly believe that 2030 is so near to build any credible confidence base to sustain a monocurrency, right? You need a longer period of prolonged policy coherence, credibility. You know, it's like you're married to someone. If your husband cheats and you catch him, right? Get to know it comes like say, my wala, I know I changed man. No, it shouldn't be. No, surely you will be skeptical, right? We would like just to observe over a period of days, weeks, months, years, to see if he's not repeating the same behavior. So that is the biggest undoing to this whole discourse. It's a confidence issue. And we cannot timeline confidence. That is my biggest problem with the 2030 de-dollarization agenda. So what has it done? If you talk to bankers, I hope there are bankers in this room. They are not extending any facility beyond the 2030. So they have plateaued credit creation. So you are shrinking the economy, you are choking the economy. And it's because of premature communication. If I was the RBC governor, I was not going to say we're going to de-dollarize by 2030. I was going to do my homework quietly, right? Work on the fundamentals quietly. Demonstrate that I may change the husband quietly. Then you strike or you matter. When everyone now believes that no, this is not the right institution. Thank you.
To use your language, Bessie, you have to agree with me that you must now respond to this.
Thank you. I think the arguments, the discussion by my friend, they only demonstrate the nature of the problem that I've highlighted. Starting with the time frame for the monocurrency and giving a historical background to it. If you remember, the monocurrency regime in the beginning, it didn't have a timeline. And the same bankers and us, we complain to say, but you can't work with this multiple currency regime with no time. It's dangerous because you can wake up tomorrow and say, this is the end of the multiple currency regime. And I think the authorities are on record reminding the market that when that happened, they sought their inputs and advice as to when the timeline set. And I think 2030 then was accurate.
I think we started with 2025.
I mean, maybe yes, and then extended. It was then extended after consultations. But what that only demonstrates, but I'm hearing we are now suggesting that we should not work with a target, right? Which we didn't have in the first place, which to me emphasizes the point that I've made relating to the complexity of the problem that we face as an economy. And we should agree that we are dealing with a complex problem here. And all we need is to put our heads together and agree on how we should approach this problem. Admittedly, the history has not been very good in terms of the conduct of the policies, but also in terms of the effect on stability, which resulted in loss of value to the folks, which resulted in loss of savings, and the memories are still fresh in people's mind. You cannot afford not to acknowledge that. That's why it becomes a very difficult subject. But despite the difficulty of the subject, I think we should agree in principle that what we are trying to do is something acceptable and good for the nation, despite the history, despite the challenges that we went through as a country. We should also agree that more than anyone else is the policymaker who is to redouble their efforts to convince the market that this time is different. And it's indeed different. So which I think the policymaker is started doing, starting with the structured cards. Yes, there were challenges along the way. I know he's referring to the 27th September shock, which from where I sit, because we are dealing with a new thing, you cannot be 100% in terms of the calibrations of what way to start, where to set. And admittedly, with a challenge of a shock, reflective maybe of the timing, reflective of maybe how we set up the exchange rate in the first place. But given the prolonged stability that we are now experiencing in the economy, I'm now convinced that all the parameters you've set down and we are on course to rebuild the fundamentals. Admittedly, again, we are not yet there. We still need to rebuild the reserves, but at the pace we are rebuilding the reserves, and which reserves are used to support the convertibility of the currency, which most of you may want to agree with me that you are realizing convertibility of currency in the market, on the interbank market. Yes, we may not agree in every quarter of life, but this is what is happening. We may also want to agree with me that on account of the tight monetary policy stance, but also fiscal and monetary prudence, we have a measure of stability in the economy. And this stability is entrenching in the economy. Yes, there are still issues that needs to be sorted out, given the nature of our problem, that it is a long-term problem. And slowly but surely, those issues are being addressed, especially the issue of the demand for the local currency or the options for use, the use case of the local currency. They are being addressed, but they cannot be addressed overnight. There's quite a lot that is happening, that is rallying the market back to the local currency. Yes, there's still a lot who are in disbelief about where the monetary authorities are taking us to, but there's quite a lot. There are also a lot who are starting to believe on daily basis, especially tracing from the stability that we have been seeing over time.
It was, I'm not sure if the viewers could pick this. There was a lot of reaction and response from the room and their own memory. And yeah, I think the battered wife is not convinced in the extent the husband has changed. And as for the confidence in the local currency and its demand, I personally had never touched a single zig. I don't even know what it looks like outside of a newspaper, but we're hoping that it will become more and more available. To you, George, what does a well-managed de-dollarization process look like?
The well-managed de-dollarization process. That's a hard question.
Yeah, literature divided people as clever.
Look, I think what is key, if we are the better life and the policymakers are the cheating husband, what is key is an acknowledgement that we have kids. That school fees must be paid. Whatever's going on between us. And the only way school fees is going to be paid, and we're not going to raise little thugs and murderers in this household, is if we actually sit together and we manage this thing together. You can't be saying Baba and do your own thing, and I'm saying I'm the mother and I'll do my own thing. It's not going to turn out. It's not going to turn out well. And that's why even when the central banker is saying everybody's getting more for a currency they want, the FDs are saying they're shaking their heads in memory because the FDs are doing their own thing and the central bank is doing something. I think we really have to come together now and say, we are Zimbabwe. We don't have another country. And the solution to Zimbabwe's issues are between us. I have a white business colleague that I have breakfast with quite often, and what he keeps reminding me of is, you and me, we don't have beef. Our fathers have. And he's right, we've been in this boat for nearly 25 years. And that generation that participated 25 years ago, it's almost all gone. They're almost all out of the system. Whether it's in politics, whether it's in business, wherever. We're actually new people, all of us. Percy and me were probably in university. I was in high school when Black Friday happened in 1997. I don't know where you were. You were also in high school. So, you were not in that reserve bank that crashed the currency in 1997. I was not in that private sector. We both inherited, and we both got to put up, and we both want to go out in the positive letters. I'm not going to tell my kids that I was part of the generation that screwed up the country. I don't think you want to do that either. So we've got to sit together and figure it out. We're on the same team.
Thank you for that, George. That's a little a deep note that you hit there, that none of us want to be part of the entrenching on the problems, but part of the solution. For management of expectations, I am not going to have all the fun with asking the questions. I'm asking my last round, and then we'll open it up for Q&A from members of the audience. So get ready. My questions have been the softball. These guys have the tough one. Is already waiting for you. Kipson, how do we get this right? The de-dollarization.
So,
de-dollarization, de-dollarization done without credible policy efforts is not a reform from the list. Right? It will simply just get us to where we were. So we tried this in 2019, where we reintroduced the $1 and we failed. Right? We cannot afford to fail again. Surely, George, would you send your kids for exams to headphone for 10 times? You can't. There's a point where you say, Manambu, Zakona, you don't. You understand? So, this is my pain point. We need to get it right. So, we need the policy anchors right. I'm happy, Percy and this team at RBZ. They are working on the numerical matrices as well. The reserves, they're trying to stabilize the exchange rate and all those things. Of course, it talks about prolonged exchange rate. It's not prolonged stability. It's not prolonged. It's only less than a year. So you cannot say we've had prolonged stability when it is not more than a year. It is not.
Ask Kipson.
All right, that's not bad. But I like what he said. To say this is not a game for the authorities only. And George also buttressed that point. So what does that mean? It means we do not have the luxury of having a few individuals sitting around a table, drinking expensive coffee, deciding how all our lives should be affected. It should be a national issue. Let's have a national dialogue on this particular matter. Let's consult everyone from the breadth and width of our society and do what the people want. To me, that's the first right way to do it. Secondly, we already have the ZIG in circulation. What is it that we are doing to promote the demand of this particular ZIG? The government is the issue of this ZIG. Are they utilizing the ZIG and charging their services in the ZIG full? So you cannot come to me as a private citizen to say, no, this is the monocurrency, this is the way that we are going to do, and you as a government are not prepared fully to embrace it. To demonstrate that they are ready, why can't we have all taxes perhaps being paid in ZIG? Well, I don't know. Why can't we have, for instance, key commodities like fuel being available on the market in ZIG? I asked the governor this question when he met his team when we were doing our monetary policy input. He said, you know what? It's a gradual process. And I agree. It's a gradual process. So 2030 should be out. Let it be organic. Let it be an organic process. Well, to me, there is no substitute about that. Because we are dealing with people that have got wars. And it has to involve everybody. Percy and Dr. Msha, and we cannot sit at RBZ and the treasury guys and say, this is consult everybody. We never agreed on 2030. I lead one of the biggest private sector bodies in this country. Maybe we consulted others. You didn't consult us, we never agreed on 2030 de-dollarization agenda. And I don't think we will agree to it because I think it's too soon.
So when is the right time?
No one knows. Right? No one knows. It's a function of the trust boom that we are going to have. It's a function of the stability that we are going to have. Right? Yes, we can have a timeline, but that timeline should not be public. I don't hear the columns with RBZF 2030 as their timeline, but it is their timeline. It should not be our timeline. Got it?
Got it. I think I'm gonna change the order a little bit and end with you, Percy. I just want to find out from George. In what ways could tech, innovation, digitalization support these fiscal and monetary policy reforms, de-dollarization agenda implementation that we're talking about?
It's always nice to have a lady when the temperature is rising. She just clever changes the topic. Makes her feel like we're still in charge. First, let me just underscore, we're living in a golden age of human development. The strides we've made in terms of information and communication technologies in the last generation, in the last 25 years, we don't see it because we're living in them. But it's mind-blowing. If you think that the first smartphone was created with almost everyone in this room was already an adult. Think about that. Almost everyone in this room actually saw the first cell phone come into this country. And it's become so ubiquitous. Not only the mobile device, but the smartphone. Over 90% of Zimbabwe's adult population have smartphones. And they access the internet. It's mind-blowing that such tremendous progress has been made in the space of our lives. We need to now harness these ICT developments for national development. Number one, it's giving us the platform to catch up with the whole world, because we're learning at the same time as everybody else. So we have this huge demographic dividend with youngsters. We have advanced education. We know this. Our kids going to the diaspora, they do as well as kids in the first world, and better in many cases. So our education system has been very good until now. We have the same access to all these new technologies. We should be piling into that big time and positioning ourselves on the very, very cutting edge of global technologies. We've just done a massive system upgrade at ICAZ. We had some developers from Eastern Europe help us build your system, but they built it according to our spec. We dreamt it, they built it. One of our competitors also did a massive upgrade. They spent a lot more money than us. That's their problem. But they bought their system from China. They bought the latest stuff from Huawei. We've got the same stuff. This is what Huawei is selling all over the world. We've got it in Zim. Bought from China. We also have it in Zim, imagined and created by young Zimbabwe. So we are at the same level as everybody. What makes a difference to where we are in the world over the next 10, 15 years is what we do with this platform. It's how creative we are. It's what resources we now poured into the development of our people, into the development of the ICTs, so that we become the leaders. If we pick any aspect of ICT today, you decide we want to be the greatest at it. We want to be the greatest at banking systems. We're on an equal platform to anybody else. We want to be the greatest at educational technologies. We're on an equal platform with anybody else because it's all new. There's nobody who is an adult today who was born with a smartphone. In way more. We're all the same. So I think we need to harness these technologies. We need to really step up and view them not as something peripheral, but as something that can actually be central to our development. I think we all tend to think in terms of legacy, the legacy economy around agriculture, around mining. And all our attention is focused there. But if you actually look at how many people can be employed in agriculture and mining, it's not that many. If you look at the big catch-up we have to play If we look at mining, our exploration is decades behind our peers in mining. When I say our exploration is decades behind, we don't know what's underground in this country before we even start thinking about digging it. If we look at our agriculture, we still have a lot of policy and systemic issues to address in agriculture before it can really, really take off. But putting a bunch of kids in a room and teaching them to code, making internet widely accessible
And cheaper.
and cheaper. I mean, how much would it cost, Percy, in this whole big discussion about fiscal, monetary, treasury, central bank? How much is the country's willing to? How much is a national debt in the big scale? It's nothing. Even if we said everybody, internet is for free. But imagine the impact of the government that would. It's the young kids who's got a mathematical brain can be taught to code. They can work for Coop on their smartphone in Mzala. Or they can create good. So, if I did cost
You are in your zone, but I think what it does speak to is broader inclusion in national development, which is indeed part of Agenda 2030, that is part of AQs.
yes, that's my point. That's we're literally we've got this once in a lifetime or once in several lifetimes opportunity to open this thing up and give everybody an equal chance to be a part of it.
Indeed.
And to make ourselves a relevant part of the world in this new world.
Thank you, George. A question for you, Bresi. Back to the topic of the panel, the roadmap to upper middle class status by 2030. In your view, what do we need to get right? What are the 3 things we must pursue to get us closer to that? Maybe not in 2030, but certainly much closer than we are today.
Thank you. I think from the discussions we have been having, it is very clear that members would like to see a stable environment. This is a key issue at stake, and this is a key issue that is concerning the matrix. And that vision is recognized. That's why we started the stability aspect. You remember TSP, Transitional Stabilization Program. But the stability aspect remains throughout the developmental aspects of the Vision 2030. So I think the greatest news would be a stable environment. But a stable environment, in my view, would also need us to compromise a permanently stable environment. Would need the same markets to compromise, especially relating to the discussion we've been having. I know the dollarization or the dollar environment would be the most popular, even if you go outside. It will be the most popular option. But in my view, and from experience, it's not the effective option for the country to take. But which means we have to find each other. So we see how the effective option for the country can be then accepted in the country. So the effective option for the country, which is not the popular, clearly not the popular, is at a certain stage or at a certain time that we have our own currency. But admittedly, but also is recognized by the monetary authorities, the process should be market-driven and the process should be organic. But when you have your own currency, when you have a functional, stable currency, you are then able to build on the economy. You have created a foundation, an important foundation of building on the economy, to rebuild the economy, rebuilding our infrastructure, rebuilding our real sectors of the economy. That's why this vision speaks about the growth in the economy, but it also speaks about a monetary target to say an upper middle income class would have this income between 4.5 or so to 14 or so thousand US dollars per annum. So it speaks to the performance of the new sectors of our economy. And we have started to see the pickup in the real sectors of the economy. Our agriculture sector has started to pick up, and we have seen transformation of our agriculture sector. We are now yet self-sufficient. Our cereal production is picked up. Tobacco, we have recorded the highest level of tobacco production of 355 million kgs since this country was born. The mining sector, which is a new sector of the economy, we have also started to see improvements, real improvements in the mining sectors of the economy. And we expect the mining sector to drive growth this year and going forward. So this is the performance of the new sectors of the economy. But also in terms of our economy, we now know better that our economy is bigger than what we thought. At $44 or $45.7 billion, and with a target of $53 billion. But we still have an issue on that economy, because more than 70% of that economy is informalized. So I would desire to see a more formalized economy, which contributes to the mainstream economy, which contributes to the fiscals, and which unbetters the few that are contributing to the fiscals. But beyond these quantitative targets, you want to see these targets translating into the welfare of the people, which speaks to social service delivery, the state of our health sector, the state of our education sector, the state of the social services in the economy. You have to then speak to all those. But which is the stage we are going into, the developmental stage, which is the NDS 2. So which is the developmental stage, and it has to sum up with the quality of the people, irregardless of the level of income. But we have to now speak to the soft issues, the quality of life of the ordinary Zimbabwe, but which quality of life speaks to everyone in the economy, not a few. That's why the development and the growth should be shared. So we want a more prosperous and a shared economy as we get to the 2030.
Thank you for that. I think we finally got agreement right towards the end amongst our esteemed panelists. Now, would there be any questions from the audience? I know that we are standing between you and the corner liquor store that the doctor told us not to go to. Towards. There's a question at the back, and the gentleman in the suit here can proceed.
Thank you. I think we are.
Mr. Gwanyanya, I just wanted to contribute and ask a question on exchange rate management, where I believe as a bank, I've heard your principals talking about that our local currency is actually underpadded because you've got more reserves, etc. But I'm not seeing how you are trying, in terms of policy perspective, to make the market freer to actually trade and determine a price. Now, we do have the interbank, which you talk about, which is close to 20 to 30% different from what we are seeing obtaining in the supermarkets. And I've observed that banks, if you've got a nostro, they will allow you to withdraw ZIC at the interbank. But if you've got a ZIC account, they don't allow you to withdraw US dollars from the same ATM. To me, it's actually indicating that they know they will lose. There is a market rate somewhere. Why can't we put a policy where even periodic changes can come and we've got a centrally determined exchange rate which we can all use rather than having multiple rates in an economy? That's my submission.
Thank you. On the question of exchange rate determination, I think it's similar sentiments have been highlighted by the IMF in their previous Article 4. But these sentiments reflect the structure of our economy, which also traces to the journey we've traveled as an economy. What is the structure of our economy? And this structure of our economy has hindered the efficient functionality of the interbank market. Ideally, banks should be trading foreign currency with each other. But in our situation, and also trading the foreign currency with the customers. But in our situation, tracing from the historical makeup of our economy, that we are a commodity-dependent economy, which is driven by a few large enterprises and individuals. The foreign currency or the money is concentrated in a few large corporates and individuals. And these few large corporates and individuals, they tend to privatize the foreign currency. Out of the foreign currency that is generated in the economy, you may find out that more than 95% of the payments that are done in the formal sector are on foreign currency, meaning you generate your foreign currency and you don't trade the foreign currency in the interbank market. So what does that leave us to? It leaves us to an economy outside the interventions of the monetary authority, which is unable to distribute and make accessible the foreign currency to the rest of the economy if the market is left alone in this inefficient state. It may not be able to do that. So if that market is not able to do that, it means we may not be able to access the money import fuel, to import medicines, and other critical requirements of the country. It's unsurprising that because of that structural makeup of the economy, the central bank has continued with the exchange control regulations from 1960 or 1962. And these exchange control regulations speak to the surrender he was talking about. See, when you export, you have to surrender some foreign currency to the country so it becomes accessible to other players in the market. and the central bank then intervenes to that extent in making foreign currency accessible to other players in the market. But as they do that, as you access the foreign currency, the thinking is you are then also able to build capacity to be exporters of tomorrow, but to also build capacity to start manufacturing those that you are importing. That is import substitution and export drive. So this is why you see now the foreign currency market is demonstrating some measure of inefficiency, which the central bank has intervened to correct. But in correcting that, you are always seeking to tilt towards the market-driven exchange rate. And this market-driven exchange rate is supported by measures the central bank has been making. The central bank has removed the trading margins on foreign currency. The central bank is also, or the Ministry of Finance is also removed the trading margins on prices on the real sectors of the economy. And the central bank continues to open up the foreign exchange market, continues to deepen the foreign currency market. But admitted, we have not yet gotten there. We still have some structural challenges that we think with the growth of the foreign currency generators and producers in the economy, those structural irrigidities are going to go away. Then the question about why should I not be able to withdraw or to exchange my local currency for US dollar in the market? I think we need to agree that we are in a multiple currency regime. But our target at one point is to eventually get out of that multiple currency regime. Even all the countries which are in multiple currency regime, I have not heard of a country where you can exchange the local currency for foreign currency. For the simple reason, that's one of the reasons why the foreign currency is not the most desirable currency to use in domestic transactions. It's designed for a purpose that countries have their own local currency. That almost all countries, except those that went into or encountered some challenges like ours, are in multiple currency regime or use foreign currency. It's done for a purpose. In our situation, in terms of the domestic economy, in terms of the maritime base, the domestic economy is taken care of by around 60% of the monetary base, and 40% is taken care of for external transactions. So when you want now yourself to access the foreign currency from the local bank, and given the nature of the foreign currency and the value preservation needs we've spoken about, where we're coming about as a country, we will not be able to make that demand simple for the foreign currency. You won't be able to meet. The ideal situation is for the local transactions to be done in local currency, or for the local transactions to be done from the foreign currency that we have generated, not to go and buy the foreign currency on the interbank market. Because if you do so, we will not be able to meet the demand for foreign currency. We will not be able to sustain the monetary regime.
And I hear that, but I think even as you say it, you see how it contributes to the confidence problem. Because when the mandatory surrenders are done, someone is taking forex that they don't produce and give you real local currency and then say this is just as good. But when I want to exchange it for what I think is stronger, you don't want. So I hear the technical explanation, but human beings are very simple people, and confidence is based on perception. And it looks like you don't want the money that you want us to want. So I think it contributes to this confidence issue. But I'm mindful of time, and I'm not choking your rebuttal. There's gentlemen who had questions, and it might be that as you address the others, you can just jump in on this. So there was the gentleman in the suit, the gentleman in the cap, and meticulous verification lady who awarded all the gifts to a table that will remain made.
Yeah, thank you. Mine is to Dr. Gwanyanya. I think we appreciate what the government was doing. I think the efforts will look at, I think, infrastructure, development, and everything that is covered. And when you also look at policy, it's there to support what the government is doing. But we being the wife and the policymakers being the husband, we are still seeing tendencies of letting. And I look at the stability that we are seeing now being borrowed and temporary. We are probably managing a fracture. What do I mean? I think this development is coming at the back of huge or ballooning local debt that is probably accumulating at a much faster rate than we are probably saving or spending less as a fiscus. So I'm seeing an implosion at some point when this debt has to be settled. And in this whole discussion, as we look at the roadmap to de-dollarization, I haven't heard the debunking of that fear or a roadmap of how this domestic debt is going to be cleared, particularly when you look at the rate at which it is coming, and we've got a timed de-dollarization period. So I still see an implosion pending, and would really want to understand the view from the authorities on that. And the other question, though, is, you see, the policymakers need to also understand the impact it has on individual companies as run proprietors, the impact of carrying those instruments or debt instruments. I don't know what they're called anymore. We've got TBs that have matured and they've not been honored. So I think there's real need for clarity to actually have a good roadmap on how the authorities are going to deal with the domestic debts and still ensuring the same stability that we are having now.
Thank you. I think we'll park that for you as well, Percy, the roadmap to dealing with the ballooning debt while maintaining stability. Okay, it wasn't me.
Thank you so much, gentlemen. That was a very interesting panel discussion. It always sparks a lot of interest whenever the subject matter is discussed. So, given that you are here, I think my question is directed to the three of you. This is just a small number of the people that are representing the profession, the accounting profession. In your views, as we look at the monetary policy issues, do you think the profession is adequately consulted in as far as these monetary issues are concerned, given that in the end of the day, this is the very same profession that has to deal with the ripple effects of some of the policies that would have been put in place? And how do you see the profession, the accounting profession, contributing to the monetary policies that we have as we progress? Because we always find ourselves at the end of the line, and the next thing, there is the expectation that we need to sort things out when it comes to reporting. But from a consultation perspective, I'm not so sure, but I thought I would hear from you, gentlemen, given that you are very much involved in some of these things. Thank you.
Thank you. George, you're a CA? Can I pack that one for you? The levels of consultation. And they will answer a trans-based on.
She's actually my former president, so she's better placed to answer than I am.
Want a copart. You may ask your question and they will answer all those, the 3 questions, and that will be the end of our session.
Yeah, thank you, panelists, particularly Dr. Gwanyanya. You have explained well. I would like to think that mid-to-income economy is tied to GDP. Then it goes to GDP per capita. In the GDP, you have explained it well, the production of goods and the services within a particular economy over a prescribed time frame. What drives production of goods and services? What are the policies? How are we doing on the drivers of production around our land, our minerals, and around our skills in professional institutes, so that these skills can be turned into proper marketable and sellable goods and services. Then, as a question now, do we have, as policymakers, particularly at RBZ level, are we driven by statistics? Are we data driven from all those pillars of or the pillars that it drives production to inform our policies? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So that would be, how are we managing the ballooning debt while maintaining stability, and our insights and policy decisions that are driven? And then between Kipson and George, are we consulting the professionals who have to account for audit and report on how our economies and businesses are performing? So I'll start with you, and I would just encourage that time. Kipson's car is probably clapped by now, so we can answer concerns.
Thank you for the question, Mr. B. I think I've already indicated that given the circumstances we face as an economy, we have to make a choice. Whether we do or we don't. Because we face serious risks in certain aspirations that we have as an economy, reflective of our circumstances. So we need to make a choice. You cannot be aggressive on infrastructure without appropriate funding to support that infrastructure and expect that not to cause challenges as it relates to debt, but also as it relates to stability. And the choice should be to manage, to try and find an optimal level of aggression and other immunities in the economy. So the discussion should not be around, or the question is not whether we should carry on with the project that the government is doing, because there are tangible benefits that we see from those projects. Like the infrastructure, we've got the road economy that is booming, infrastructure economy that is booming. Wherever you are seeing infrastructure, you are then seeing boom in construction and quality construction. If you have got a quality road, you are assured to see quality buildings around that infrastructure. And we are happy about that. But we are also concerned about the effect of the same. That it is creating unsustainable debt, especially domestic debt. So the government is trying to come up with other measures to deal with the funding of infrastructure, but also to deal with debt. I can give you an example. Because most of these contractors are also into real estate, they're also into land. And the government owns significant land on the land in the country, variable land, etc. And I understand there were discussions around the trade of the outstanding balances or even trade in the future in exchange for land. And these are discussions that are happening. But there's always discussions that is happening between the creditors and government in solutions that they're coming up with. It would be surprising or to realize that some of the creditors that are owed by government, they continue to want the jobs from government because government is the biggest player in the market, which is a position that this Vision 2030 also wants to reverse, that the government is the biggest player in the market. So to answer your question, it is an issue of compromise. It is an issue of agreeing, but it is an issue of continuously trying to find or to come up with sustainable funding ways. There are discussions that are happening around debt at higher level that were indicated, and we hope those discussions to benefit the economy when they are concluded. But in the meantime, let's try and manage with what we have. And we are seeing the results as they affect the economy in a positive way. And let's manage what is the negatives out of those.
Thank you. And then the German's question, data-driven policy making.
Yeah. So I think like all other monetary authorities, but like all other policymakers, we tend to rely more on the data. You may want to know that our Zinstas has recently conducted an economic census to give us more insights into the economy. And we now know better that our economy is more formalized than we thought. We now know better that the manufacturing sector is the biggest contributor to the GDP than we thought. We now know more better that the wholesale and retail sector is not the biggest contributor to the GDP than we thought. And I understand these censuses are ongoing. There's always a feeling that 2023 we used was a drought year. It was an unstable year. We may want to even consider another year so we get more insights in the economy. And these are the same insights we are using now to intervene in the economy, to get a more understanding of the economy and also to come up with more informed policies in the economy.
Thank you for that. And Kipson, are you happy to take the consultation question?
Well, my great sister Manyara, I think she's a seasoned player in this field, so I consider the question very hard to tell you. She knows that sometimes you have to be proactive. Okay, you cannot just wait for the authorities to come to you. Sometimes you have to go to them and tell them this is what you want as a profession. So my upper submission, my sister, is be proactive. These guys, when they are podiums, they say open door policy. So utilize it and have your views yet. But I wanted to add to an important point that my brother raised about debt. Actually, I didn't want to say this, but it provoked me to say it. Actually, my greatest fear surrounding de-dollarization, I think it's a skill to extinguish domestic things. I will not be responsible for making of this, so they can't. And that's what I want to do, because exactly I agree. I understand the limitations, the constraints, and everything else. and the thinking that the returns from this capital investments will outweigh the cost associated with debt, allowing us to repay this debt in the long run, blah, blah, all those kind of things. Granted, but the tying debt balloon, particularly domestic debt, and de-dollarization is a stretch. You might need to sanitize our fears there. They think you just want to cure worry and establish and increase the state. So I share your your views and your plight. Thank you.
Thank you. Happy for us to close, gentlemen? We're done? Yeah. I think they have acquitted themselves excellently. Would you mind very much asking afterwards? Thank you. Arima.